The views and opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect those of Access Fort Wayne, the Allen County Public Library, or any other supporting groups. If you'd like to produce a show, call us at 260-421-1250.
Let me be your lighthouse so I can show you the way. Let me be your shining light, I'll keep you from drifting away. I'm the one that makes you try.
As all of you know, an event like this has some cost associated with it. We're going to give you an opportunity to help us defray those costs as the ushers pass through the auditorium. I'd also like to introduce to you Emma MacDonald. She'll be sharing a song from her Something Greater CD as we have the opportunity to share financially. Emma is a 17-year-old homeschool student who's been involved in the pro-life movement for over a decade. Emma loves music and writing songs that glorify God. While we hear from Emma, our ushers will circulate, and thank you so much for your generosity.
You know, I think one of the hardest things that we face in the midst of a war, besides the enemy itself, is feeling like we're alone in fighting it. And I think this struggle against abortion is particularly hard because not only do we have Satan and his followers against us, but we have the whole culture. One of my favorite quotes is from St. Francis of Assisi, and his saying goes, "All the darkness in the world cannot extinguish the light of a single candle." Each one of us is that candle, shining amid a spiritual darkness. This song that I wrote is called Something Greater, and it talks about feeling alone and feeling like God can't hear us. But God created each one of us to shine the light of his kingdom, and despite the pains in this life and the gravity of this issue and so many others, God created each one of us for something greater. Walking down the street, no one ever stops and notices me. I can hardly stand to be just a face in
honor to introduce our keynote speaker. Mike Spencer is the Midwest Director of Training for the Life Training Institute and also a colleague and dear friend. Many of us in this auditorium remember the early days of the fight for life in Allen County when Mike laid everything on the line for the unborn. We also remember Mike's courageous battle with cancer and the faith in the Lord Jesus Christ that his wife Barb and their family exemplified for all of us. Mike served as a pastor for 23 years before returning to his passion, defending the unborn, full-time in 2012. Please join me in welcoming our dear friend, Michael Spencer.
Well, it is a privilege to be here today. We live in Ohio now, my wife and I and our children, but we raised our kids here in Fort Wayne, and it's great to be back with so many like-minded people. You are probably aware of this, but in case you are not, this is one of the most robust pro-life communities in the United States, and that is not an overstatement. And I am selfishly excited that we do not have sub-zero temperatures today, because when you're built like Barney Fife, the cold goes right through you, and so it proves that the prayer of a skinny little runt is powerful and effective. And so I'm glad for that. It's a real delight to be with you today. Vernon Johns is a name that has been largely forgotten today, but he preceded Martin Luther King as the pastor of the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama, from 1947 to 1952. And although his name has been eclipsed by names like Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks and others, Johns is considered the father of the civil rights movement. As a boy, young Vernon, his father gave him some unusual but morally sound advice. He said, "Vernon, if you see a good fight, get in it." That counsel would later shape not only Vernon Johns' pastoral ministry, but our nation as well. Because it was his unflinching conviction and fiery disposition that laid the foundation for those who would later lead the charge against racism in our land. We are here today because we believe the fight for life is a good fight, and we're in. Although the targets of bigotry and intolerance change throughout history and from culture to culture, the biblical injunctions to defend the cause of the weak and fatherless, to speak up for those who have no voice, and to expose the fruitless deeds of darkness do not change. They press down upon our consciences like a great weight that cannot properly be lifted except through our obedience. For 36 years, an out-of-town abortionist traveled to Fort Wayne each Thursday to profit financially off of young mothers in crisis by aborting their precious unborn children. Not anymore. Thanks to God and the vigilance of the Allen County Right to Life and the pro-life community of Fort Wayne. So why are we still marching? Martin Luther King answered this for us. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. As history proves, the purveyors of injustice do not sleep or slumber, and so the struggle for human equality continues. We've gathered today because we believe that legalized abortion is the greatest moral injustice the world has ever known. Now that may sound like inflammatory rhetoric to those who have only heard about abortion, but not to those of us who have seen it with our own eyes. I want to give attention in our brief time here together this afternoon to the question that is at the heart of the abortion debate today. This is a question that has bitterly divided our nation. It is a question that is almost never articulated, but it is the heart at the center of this debate. And the question is simply this: who counts as one of us? The battle over abortion is not a battle over choice, or women's rights, or reproductive freedom. It is a battle, rather, over who counts, who will be protected, and who will remain a candidate for the dumpster. We simplify the abortion debate with one question, And that is the question, what are the unborn? This is the question that the other side wants to ignore. They want to gloss over it. They want to sweep it under the rug. But it is the question that we need to stay focused on like a laser beam. What are they? Greg Koukl, the Christian apologist, said this: if the unborn are not human, no justification for elective abortion is necessary. But if the unborn are human, no justification for elective abortion is adequate. And he's exactly right. We know through the science of human embryology, which answers this question for us, that from the earliest stages of development, the unborn are distinct, living, and whole human beings. They have their own DNA, or unique genetic fingerprint, their own blood type, race, and gender, all different than their mothers potentially. They are alive and growing. All of the characteristics that define living organisms are present in us at the very earliest point of our development, responding to stimuli, metabolizing food for energy, and growing through cellular reproduction. We often hear people refer to little boys and girls at that earliest stage of development as a fertilized egg. And I don't think that when they do this, they necessarily do it with any ill intent or any malice. But that is a misleading statement, or a misleading term to refer to little boys and girls as fertilized eggs. The fact of the matter is in the science of human embryology, there is no such thing as a fertilized egg. The moment the sperm of a man and the ovum of a woman come together and the process of conception is completed, there is no more egg and there is no more sperm. There's a little girl or a little boy. And so we're no more justified in referring to little girls and boys at that earliest stage of their development, or at any stage of their development, as a fertilized egg than we would be to refer to them as a modified sperm, and that would be weird. I think you would agree. So the science of embryology has answered the question, what are the unborn? They are distinct, living, and whole human beings from the moment of conception. Philosophically, we know that there is no morally significant difference between the adult or the young adult that you are today and the embryo that you once were that would justify killing you at that earlier stage of your development, but not today. Stephen Schwartz has pointed out that there are really only 4 differences between the adult you are today and the embryo that you once were. And while these are real differences, they are not morally significant differences such that we can appeal to them to justify taking your life at that earlier stage. The differences are simply these: size, level of development, environment, and degree of dependency. We don't appeal to those to kill children outside of the womb. Why would we use those against the children in the womb? There are 2 ways of viewing or valuing human beings, and these are the 2 worldviews, if you will, that are in conflict today in our culture regarding the sanctity or the sacredness of human life. The first view is our view. What we call typically the pro-life view, what pro-life philosopher Christopher Kazor refers to as the endowment view. This is the view that teaches that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, most notably the right to life. This view, our view, says that each individual has intrinsic moral worth independent of one's utility or function. We are valuable, not because of our skin color, not because of what we can do or where we're located, but because of the kind of thing that we are, human beings created in God's image. This view is inclusive and tolerant. Black, white, rich, poor, Jew, Gentile, born and unborn. Every human being matters. Now, I'm going to let you in on a little secret that you already know. We are the tolerant ones. We are the inclusive ones. Every life matters. Now let's contrast this briefly with the other view, their view, the so-called pro-choice view that Christopher Kazor, I think rightly or aptly refers to as the performance view. This is the view that says that only certain human beings matter, and only if they pass some subjective test that we, the powerful, establish for them the weak. Tests like viability or sentience or self-awareness. This is the view that divorces humanness from personhood. The view that now acknowledges, those even on the other side of the issue, now acknowledge the humanity of the unborn child. I spent a lot of time on university and high school campuses in my work, and almost nobody denies the humanity of the unborn child anymore. What they deny is the personhood of that child. And so they'll say something like, yes, Mike, I know it's a little girl, I know it's a little boy, I know it's alive and growing. Yes, it's human, but it's not a person. Now, this is a completely artificial distinction Have you ever met somebody that was a human that wasn't a person? Do not point to your spouse. This is a legal trick designed to justify killing children at their most vulnerable stage of development. This view, the so-called pro-choice view, is intolerant. It is exclusivistic. It destroys the foundation for human equality. Because the minute you divide the room or the womb based on subjectively chosen arbitrary standards, by the way, standards that that side doesn't even agree on, there is no consensus on what should be considered the value-giving standard. One person says sentience, the next person says viability, the next person says brainwaves, heartbeat, whatever. But the minute you divide the room or the womb based on those kinds of so-called standards, you have effectively kicked the table legs out from under human equality. This is the view that brought us the ovens of Auschwitz. The view that said Jews were humans, but they weren't persons. This is the view that put blacks in leg irons in our own land. But it's our view that let them out. There's a word for this. The word is bigotry. At the very core of the pro-choice view is a position of bigotry. Now, sadly, each generation has the astonishing ability to be repulsed by the moral crimes of those who came before them, while repeating those very same offenses. Former slave and abolitionist Frederick Douglass, writing of the brutality visited upon slaves by their slaveholders 150 years ago, said that they abused, raped, and murdered their slaves, quote, with almost as much impunity as upon the deck of a pirate ship, end quote. There was no secret in 1860 about what was happening on plantations. In fact, when slaves would escape, their owners would run ads in the newspaper offering rewards for their return and providing frank descriptions of their missing slave, even describing him or her as last seen wearing a neck collar and chains with scars on his back and the initials of his master's name burned into his flesh. But unlike the brutal treatment of slaves, the brutal treatment of the unborn by abortion is well hidden from most Americans. Abortion has been sanitized. Abortion clinics are careful to clean up real well after themselves. And as a result, most people have never seen what abortion does to little boys and girls. I have. I have held abortion in my hands. In 1991, when Barbara, my wife, and I lived, as we were living here in Fort Wayne at that time, we held in our hands a little black baby girl who had been aborted by a saline solution abortion at 7 months of gestation. She filled my hand. Her body had been lifted out of a dumpster behind an abortion clinic in Detroit, my hometown. Her perfectly formed body was beautiful, except for the fact that it was cold and stiff. Her ancestors likely suffered under the heavy boot of slavery, and now she had been crushed under the heavy boot of choice. I hear, as you do, all of the cliches and all of the slogans from the other side. My body, my choice. Don't like abortion, don't have one. Every child a wanted child. But when you hold in your hands the product of choice, a dead child, all of those slogans and all of those cliches disintegrate. And when you hold a little girl whose body was snuffed out, in the name of choice, what is left to argue? Abortion is not just another issue. It is the defining moral issue of our time. The mangled and burned bodies of little boys and girls is the irrefutable evidence that the real extremists and those waging the war on women are not pro-lifers, but those who deny these little ones their most fundamental right, the right to life. Abortion is the intentional and unjust killing of innocent human beings at their most vulnerable state of development in the most barbaric manner imaginable. Abortion dismembers, decapitates, disembowels, and burns children to death in their mother's womb. And if abortion is not evil, one is left wondering, is anything evil? Columnist George Will said this. He said, quote, "There is nothing so vulgar left in the human experience for which we cannot fly in some professor from somewhere to justify it." He wrote that a long time ago, folks. We don't have to fly these professors in. They are on every campus in America, and yes, even most evangelical and Catholic campuses as well. Ravi Zacharias, the great philosopher and apologist, said this in responding to George Will. He said, "The lesson is obvious. To be an intellectual is a great privilege, but to be an intellectual without God is dangerous." And he's right. We look back now with greater moral clarity at slavery and segregation in America, and we are embarrassed by it. It is a pockmark on the pages of our nation's history. We scorn the memory of those whose apathy and whose love for personal comfort constricted their circle of moral responsibility so tightly as to exclude their black brothers and sisters. But what about us? It is easy, comfortably removed from slavery by 150 years or segregation by 50 years, to romanticize how we might have responded to the cruel oppression of our black brothers and sisters had we lived during that period of history. And I'll be honest, I've wondered myself, would I have marched with my black brothers and sisters had I been old enough to do so on the Edmund Pettus Bridge in 1965? I don't know. To be honest with you, I don't know what I would have done, but here's what I do know. History has an annoying way of repeating itself. And if we will not speak up for the oppressed little ones, and if we will not sacrifice for the oppressed little ones who are stuck in the crosshairs of choice, when there's virtually no cost for doing so, then we can be absolutely certain we would not have stood with our black brothers and sisters when the cost for doing so was so exceedingly high. This is our Goliath. How we respond to legalized abortion presents us with the great moral character test of our times. Proverbs chapter 24, verses 11 to 12, a verse that is probably not unfamiliar to most of you, says this: "Rescue those being led away to death. Hold back those staggering towards slaughter." Why is it that verses like this, commandments like this, and so many others like it, seem to apply to every marginalized and every oppressed people group in the world except those who are most marginalized and most oppressed, most vulnerable and most targeted, the unborn? In his autobiography, Frederick Douglass writes, his autobiography titled My Bondage, My Freedom, Frederick Douglass answers this for us. He writes of what he calls the infernal character of slavery. And he says this, he says, quote, "The slaveholder, as well as the slave, is the victim of the slave system. A man's character greatly takes its hue and shape from the form and color of things about him." End quote. Abortion is like that. It has an infernal character about it that is plundering our nation's conscience and even the conscience of the evangelical and Catholic communities, leaving us cold and indifferent toward the least of these. The hue and shape, to borrow those words from Frederick Douglass, of our character is being taken from the form and color of abortion. Responding to abortion is a gospel issue. It is a loving your neighbor as yourself issue. And when we respond biblically to abortion, as we should, we are presented with a gospel opportunity. When we reach out to mothers at their most desperate hour and to the little ones that they carry, and when we provide practical care for them, we present ourselves to share the gospel of Jesus Christ, the greatest need that any of us have. I am thankful for the pastors here today, so many, and I'm so thankful for that. These shepherds understand their calling to protect the entire flock, even those yet to be born. And when these men thunder from their pulpits the sacredness of human life, and when they equip their congregations to speak intelligently and graciously to the most pressing moral issue of our time, and when they lead their flocks through the streets of Fort Wayne in just a few minutes and are labeled extremists for having done so, they are doing what God has called every pastor to do. Conversely, when pastors and priests choose silence over faithfulness, they do not spare women in their congregations who've had abortions or men who have participated in abortion decisions hurt. They spare them healing. Their silence exposes that either they don't see abortion as all that bad, or they don't see the gospel as all that good, or both. And those are terrible messages to give to women and men in our congregations who've had abortions. And I want to say this in closing. If you've had an abortion, or you have been responsible for an abortion decision, you are among friends today. Jesus Christ offers not only forgiveness, but real freedom from the guilt of your sin. And I love the sweet words of Isaiah 53, verse 5, that tell us that he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. That the punishment that brought us peace was upon him. And by his wounds, we are healed. Why do we love moms and their little ones? Because he, Jesus Christ, first loved us. Men and women, this is the greatest battle of our time. It's not just another cause. And as we go to the streets of Fort Wayne today, we do so in faith in Jesus Christ, that one day his truth and our position will prevail. Thank you so much for the opportunity to address you on such an important occasion. God bless you.